Thank you for coming back. The numbers are dwindling, I guess, but that's okay. Well, so this is the last presentation, and I was asked to present a couple of flights that I had a little while ago. And so what I'm going to try and do is coordinate between the PowerPoint and CU. So pardon me as I bounce back and forth a little bit, but the title, and for the record, was There and Back Again. It's basically a tale of two cross-country flights, a 300-kilometer out and return, and a 100-kilometer out and return. And also, besides showing some interesting points that compare and contrast, also, I will be using CU, and hopefully you'll be able to learn a little bit more about CU from the way I use it. It's not designed to be a tutorial on everything you need to know about CU, but more or less how I use it. So there's the objectives. Participants will learn how mindset may affect decision making. Participants will learn about the importance of situational awareness in making decisions during a soaring flight. Kind of be aware of what are the factors that influence my decision making, and be tuned into those. Past performance is not an indication of future performance. It's like when you go buy to your stockbroker, they give you the brochure. It says just because it made money last year, it's not going to make money this year. That's one of the lessons. And hopefully expand your knowledge of using CU to analyze soaring flights. So the first flight is a 300K out and return. It was flown on May 2nd, 2015, so 4 years ago. The task was planned very nicely by a fellow named Lou Chenard, and it was stolen by YKW. You know who. And I've taken just a little bit of ribbing about that deck. Yeah, I planned that flight for you and me. So anyhow, it was from Stanton to a turn point that was created by Lou, South 80, and I'll show you where that is, and back to Stanton. A distance of 192.8 miles. Dan Zimmerman was the co-pilot, and of course we're flying in the DG.
Point of contention. It wasn't just a task, it was a state record.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I pointed out to Lou, that just sets the bar. We go out and he and I can beat that. Oh, yes. There's no hard feelings, though, right? So, anyhow, this is a photo from CU. Is showing here's Stanton up here. Here's our turn point down here, and I'll show you some other slides that show the cities and so forth. So the flight was to the southwest, south-southwest, and as you'll see, here's the starting point. Obviously, Lake Billsby here. Here's our glider. There, the little gray area that's across there, that's Stanton Airport. Here's Northfield. And the south turn point then is right here, right by Forest City. Mason City, Iowa is right over here. So kind of in that area. Forest City has a nice airport, but there was no landing place at the turn point. So here's the first piece I wanted to show you, that we took off on tow out of Stanton. I don't remember exactly where we released, but probably right about there. Do you see what happened right after we released from tow?
I am.
Boom! And by the time we got back to the airport, a distance of what, maybe about 2 or 3 miles, we were over 5,000, almost 6,000 feet MSL, or 5,000 AGL. Now, according to the numbers we were talking about earlier today, that's not a bad place to start, right? So we hooked around into the start zone and started right now. And so we took a little thermal here, and then we came over here by Northfield, and we went under that 6,000-foot shelf, and we were kind of watching our altitude fairly closely, and we didn't thermal in here, but we thermaled right outside of it, and the wind was out of the south. Oh, interesting. So here we are, airspace 6,000-foot ceiling. We were at 5,879 feet right here. So we just barely missed violating airspace. There's a lesson there. Pay attention. I mean, so remember that's territory over by Northfield. So along the way, we went right by Owatonna, both coming and going. So we had an airport there. We went by, not too far from Faribault as well. Right by Albert Lee, so we had another option there. And we came down here, and we were getting a little bit low here, so we took a couple turns, but it wasn't real strong. And also, we were drifting away from our turn point, and we're kind of low here, and we want to get the turn point. So we gave up on that thermal, came here and got the turn point, and came over here. As I remember, there's a cloud over there and a good thermal there.
Dick, question there?
Yeah.
For speed, it's obviously good tactics to go into upwind turn points relatively low, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to waste time thermally,
Exactly.
assuming that you have to circle to thermal to time.
Yeah.
So did you do that deliberately here, or did you just run out of air nearly? Which one was it? Was it tactical? Or was
No, it ran out of
It
air.
happened to you, okay.
Yes. Yeah, it wasn't intentional. And so, I think, well, I guess what, I don't have the slide in the right order. Anyhow, as we got to the thermal, the direction we were going here is off that direction to head towards the Forest City Airport. We figured if we don't get a thermal, we better be near the airport. But on the way there, we caught that thermal. And we were 2,000 feet AGL, so we still had some altitude, but we were getting a little tight in the stomach and a little concerned. So I'm going to show you some statistics in a bit, but our final glide was from 44.8 miles out from here all the way back to Stanton, and we finished with extra altitude a little bit, with a glide ratio of 44-1, and a tailwind. I mean, that's a nice way to finish. So next, I'm going to show you some statistics, and let me see if I can do this. So what I wanted to show you is, in selecting statistics for this particular flight, you can look at statistics for the whole flight, including the takeoff and so forth. And sometimes, like for a competition, you spend an hour or so waiting for the start, but you don't really want to include all that stuff in the start cylinder, so you would want to look at the statistics for a defined task. And the things I look at a lot would be number of thermals, average thermal strength, number of tries, how much altitude was gained or lost, like you pointed out before, the time lost in tries, and then also the number of glides, average glide distance, like to have longer glides ideally, and average glide ratio. And I guess we'll cover that, hopefully, if we have time at the end. Okay, I'm going to have to...
And thank you for the statement that I talked about, looking at the altitude gain or lost
in the
tries. That's from Tony Smolder out of
Yeah.
Houston. He taught me that.
If you notice the number of minutes lost in those tries, that was not a racing task that we were talking about, but it was 13 minutes. In a race, that would be awful. If you're in competition, you might take tries, but you don't want to waste that much time. Whole different ballgame. So on our outbound leg, it took us 2 hours, almost 3 hours, 2 hours, 57 minutes. Our average speed was 28.35 miles an hour. Not very fast. 22 glides, average glide was 5.7. Mean L over D, 48. That's not too bad. 21 thermals, average variable was 2.5. The wind was somewhere in this, about 210 degrees, south-southwest, 16 to 18 knots, okay? On the way back, it took us an hour and 14 minutes, less than half the time. Our speed was 67.4 miles an hour. 5 glides, average glide was almost 19 miles. Mean L over D was 72. 4 thermals, average variable 4.2 knots. The wind was 225 at 19 to 20 knots. Huge difference. I mean, we worked fairly hard to get there, turn around, got that first thermal by Forest City after we had the turn. Let's go home. That was fun.
Before you move on.
Yeah.
ground speed of those two.
Yeah.
If you take the wind out of it,
Uh-huh.
the ground speed looks pretty darn close.
Yes.
Feet over the ground.
Yeah, yeah, right. So
Regardless of how many thermals you took.
if you added 20 to this and took 20 away from that, they're almost identical.
Yeah.
Which makes sense, right?
No, it doesn't, because you took more thermals on the outbound leg and fewer thermals on the way back.
But our,
So if you think about your thermals as making a longer track, but you're actually progressing less far, it's really interesting to see that. Because you did 5 times as many thermals going out, yet you covered the ground in the same amount of time you would have had there not been a headwind. Like you're traveling a longer course, so it looks like you were flying faster.
Faster. Well, that makes
between.
sense, right? That
Through
your
the air
airspeed
mass.
was faster into the wind, right?
that's a
Yes,
good
your
point.
airspeed was
That,
faster going out than it was going back,
That's-
but your ground speed, your ground
Yeah.
track is almost identical.
yes, it is. It's almost identical.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying. That,
Yeah,
that
but
to me,
you're flying a longer track to get out than you were to fly back.
yeah, because of the
You
drifting
straighten it
back.
out with a string.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, that's another thing I look at, is our speed on glides in sync versus lift. There should be a spread. We should be flying, if we're racing, we should be flying faster in sync than we are in lift. We should, at least that's my theory, that I like to make sure there's some spread in that speed, that we're adjusting for lift and sync.
Yeah, and that, whether or not you're racing,
Yeah.
that's true. That's true when you're just gliding around the airport.
Yeah.
Right, so that's not a racing tactic, that's just survival 101 in the sky.
Now, some people would call that dolphining, but at which, at any rate, yeah.
Is there a chance that it only measures your glide speed when you're gliding, and your speed over the ground when you're gliding, and it gives you 0 when you're circling? Or it discounts all your circling time?
How does CU measure?
I think it's overall.
I think it's overall, it includes, how long did it take you to get from A to B divided by the distance.
Okay.
So Christine makes a good point that we're flying further because we're drifting and flying again, drifting, flying again. I'm not smart enough to get that all figured out standing up here. And Bob Wander's probably got this already figured
Tina
out.
brought it up, not.
No, your total time matches with that being the average speed.
Okay. So I'll show you an altitude graph shortly, but I like to look at the altitude along the whole flight, the high point, low point, greatest altitude gain, strongest thermal, working height bands. So I'm going to kind of speed this up a little bit so we can get out and get some flying. So on this particular flight, our strongest thermal was this one right here. 7 knots, 1,775 feet gain. Whew! That's a good thermal in Minnesota. I like that. And our best altitude gain was this one, and I forget the amount, I'd have to show the statistics, but I think it was about 2,000 feet of gain there, or maybe it was more than that. But it's almost a little bit more. So, and then you can see the sort of the height band we were working. This guy, this sticks out as being a little bit low. This is a little bit low. This is when we were down at, yeah, and then back up here again.
What metric were you using to decide when to, because it looked, you have that one where you went super high, but
Yeah.
then you weren't going to the top of the rest. Why?
I think we were going to the top of them pretty much, not till they petered out completely, but kind of using approximately that figure of 80%, 75% when the strength is really petering out, and a lot of times you get a feel for it. You can kind of just feel the thermal is starting to get wimpy. Let's go. Especially on a day like today when we had good altitude, good strong thermals. Nice, to my eye, kind of nice sawtooth pattern, steep climbs, steep descents. That usually, we weren't really racing, but that's kind of the style I like to do. So a summary. This was a declared out and return for a state record, flown in line with the wind, both coming and going, challenging leg into the wind, easy flight back to Stanton, moderately strong, reliable thermals, actually maybe even more than moderately strong, and the crux was the low point near the turn point. Fun flight, especially the return leg. Yeah.
What was your start altitude and your finish altitude?
I could show you if I had.
Altitude was 4,700 AGL, 5,700 MSL.
Yep.
But
I mentioned that already.
but your return had to be above 2,000 feet.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had altitude to spare. And actually, the altitude I think that I put on that slide near the start was not technically the last minute, the last second we crossed. It was at that high point, right off a toe, basically. So it's very close to that. Yeah.
Yeah, but it brings up one thing. If you're sitting here and you've done a great flight and you can't wait to get home and celebrate,
Yeah.
and you've got a great final glide and
Yeah.
you gotta drop the hammer, always remember your altitude you gotta have, because you could come burning in at 1,500 feet, get right into the pattern and just blow your flight.
Blow you right.
Because you lost your 1,000 meters altitude.
I think it was in 2005, Steve Metz and I flew on the same day, both in the 15-meter class. I was flying the Ventus. And we both flew a 500-kilometer flight for attempting state records. I think my high point in the flight was over 9,000 feet, and I'm sure it was for him too. It was an incredible day. And I finished just a whisker faster than he did, and I would have had the record, but I finished one wingspan too low. One wingspan. Paul Remdy was the state record keeper, and he called me and said, Dick, I hate to tell you this, and I never thought about it, just like you said. I was going like a bat out of hell and having a great time, and crap.
Can you unpack the 1,000-meter requirement for us?
Oh,
Yeah, we did that. So you are allowed a maximum for any distance or goal flights for FAI badges or state records that are distance related. You're allowed a maximum of a 1,000 meter altitude loss from start to finish.
Start to finish, okay?
From
not
the
high
st-
point during the flight.
No.
right, from the
So if you
altitude
start
you're at.
super high at your start point is maybe not an advantage.
Right, and so what we
Well,
said
it depends. If you can start at 8,000 feet and be already in a great lift band, but you have to finish high then as well.
Right, that's
Yeah, you keep that in
You
mind.
start
Turn it off
start
at
pretty
the end of
strong,
the day,
you
that
might
could-
run
that could
yourself
be
into a
the-
corner.
But like if, I'm thinking of that as like if I'm gonna do a 100-kilometer triangle, that would be great. That'd be super. Or 200 maybe, you're talking about a 500-kilometer flight, maybe not. So depending on how long the flight is. So it's kind of fun to think about all the different factors to consider. So the next flight is,
Before you go on,
Yeah.
two questions
Yeah.
about the current one.
Yeah.
So you were in line with the wind. Were you streeting at any time?
on the way back, and I think we were pretty much streeting, following lift lines basically,
Yeah, that's right.
most of the time.
So you did see them and detect them, and then the second question
Yeah.
was the day blue or was it Q?
We had cues.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Done. Thank you.
So the second one is 100K, short one. Task was planned, more or less planned after takeoff. It wasn't declared. I'll look, if I can show you the flight, I will. And it's Stanton, Dodge Center to Stanton. Distance 66 miles. Flown on April 16th, 2016, a year later. And very early in the season. In fact, I think it was the only second flight I had in Minnesota that year. Same pilots, Dan Zimmerman and myself, same glider. Okay, and so here's the flight. I mean, we started here at Stanton. Here's Dodge Center. Okay, and here's our tow. Towed out here, released in a thermal, climbed up. What the heck? Just like last time, right? We're excited already. Okay, so if you look closely, you can see the gray lines here. I think our initial plan, I don't really remember, but I think our initial plan was to do the Stanton short task. But once we got off tow and started flying around, we realized today's a pretty good day. Why don't we go to Dodge Center and back again? Whoa, that would be fun. The wind's out of the south, 166 degrees at 22 knots. Well, that's not much different than what we did last year, right? When we went did a set a state record. And Dodge Center's only, 50 kilometers? I mean, ye gods, it's pretty easy. So we got some thermals. We decided, all right, let's go for it, right? So out here, 10 miles from Stanton, we're at almost 7,000 feet. Piece of cake. It's not that far. We only got 22 miles left to go. So halfway there, we're still almost at 7,000 feet. Looking good. Okay. 8.73 miles from Dodge, we're at 6,000 feet MSL. The last 7.7 miles we covered, and we covered the mileage with only 768 feet of altitude loss, glide ratio of 53, no circling. Gosh, what could be better, right?
Waiting for the shoe to drop there.
Well, I'm obviously, I'm literally setting you up for this, maybe a little too much. I was hoping to kind of surprise you about it. Nah, we'll be, so all of a sudden things change. Okay, we're 6.8 miles out now at 5,000 feet, 1,700 feet lower or whatever. We covered 1.9 miles, lost 1,000 feet. Our glide ratio is now 10. Whoa. Now we're so far out there, we can't get back to Stanton. That happened just like that, in my view. I mean, that's how it felt at the time. We're cooking, man. We're cruising. We went all these miles into this 22-knot wind, hardly lost anything. And now, crap. We can't go back. Won't make it.
But you got Dodge Center, no problem.
Got Dodge Center, no problem. Here we are 3.3 miles away from Dodge Center. We're at 4,000 MSL. Come on, our glider's got 46 to 1, right?
He's okay.
Yeah, notice how we kind of try to climb here, we try to climb here. All we're doing is drifting away from the airport, okay? So we're 3.3 miles from the airport. Now we're 1 mile out. We're down to 3,000 MSL. We're dropping like a brick. And guess what's between us and the airport? Guess what town is right there? Dodge Center. We're going down like a brick and we have to fly over the town in order to get there. So we do manage to make it. We're still going down, flew right over town, came down here, and by golly, we found some lift. And I would show you on the altitude graph or whatever, show you the statistics. This is maybe about 700 feet above the ground. But what happened a year ago when we got low at the turn point? I'm not saying I was thinking that, but it influenced me. My mindset was, hey, we were heroes last time. I wasn't thinking, honestly, it wasn't a conscious thought. And then I very quickly realized, what the hell am I doing? Circling at this altitude with this much wind, 24 knots of wind right now. And so we hooked in and landed. Mindset, decision making. I failed, and notice how we had that kind of long stretch where we were holding our altitude or even gaining altitude. Glide ratio was great. Did I ever stop and think, what guarantee do I have that this lift is going to continue for the rest of the flight?
Did you, were you flying a day with cumulus clouds, or did you cross into a different air mass, or?
I don't remember. I don't remember if there were clouds or not. I apologize for that, but
But you haven't had a significant change in wind direction.
no, the direction hasn't changed significantly.
Would it have been worthwhile to deviate your track to get out of whatever mass of sinking area you're in?
Well, you know, from my recollection, this happened so quickly that we went from heroes to like, well, things are changing, but it's going to come back. You know, for the first, whatever, minute or two, you think, well, this is, you know, sink can't last forever. Oh, yeah, I can. And then if we started to deviate, we'd be too far from the airport. And so I can't say we had time to really think about all these different options. It would have been not a bad idea, except we just barely made the airport going straight in. So, and I'm sharing this with you, not to scare you, but to let you know, you got to be on your toes, and things can change. And if you're, you know, in some respect, we were fat, dumb, and happy. There was just two of us. But I should have been thinking more about, wait a minute, we got all this lift. I don't know why it's here, but man, this is great. It could change, and we could be in a pickle. So, woohoo, we made it. Here's the altitude graph. Yeah, and so one of the things I wanted to point out to you is you don't see that sawtooth pattern like you did on the previous one. okay? I mean, there's some little climbs and so forth, but we were not finding many thermals. We were flying in some continuous lift that I still don't understand why it was there. It wasn't a cloud street, it was an energy line. And look how high we were and how close we were to dot center. And so,
A remark there, Dick?
yeah,
On both coasts, and in other places in the US, people fly lines of convergence lift.
Yes.
Because they
Yes.
have air masses and sea masses.
yes,
We're not generally very well tuned into that into the Midwest. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't happen.
Right.
By absolute certain knowledge, it does. I've watched it, I've flown it, and I've been shot down by it multiple times.
yeah,
The two best books on this that I know of are Understanding the Sky by Dennis Pagan. He's a brilliant engineer, hang glider, world champion pilot. And then Rolf Hertenstein's book that I'm lucky enough to publish, which is Riding on Air.
Yeah.
And they go in great detail to convergence air masses and what to look for. We had a ton of it yesterday with that frontal passage. Most of us don't have eyes to see that until we study it hard, which is what I had to do. So I recommend both those books without reservation.
Thank you.
Understanding the Sky, Dennis Pagan, Pagen, and then Riding on Air, which I could offer.
If I'm able to bring up the statistics, I think I can show you that the wind direction did vary according to altitude. And that was my thought, is maybe there was some kind of convergence of these two different directions of
Almost
airflow.
What was going on was that this one was pushing this one up, and then you got to the point where it wasn't being pushed up, and the downdraft was flowing into the convergence. Bye-bye.
I think that's what happened.
Yes, I've seen it before.
Yeah,
It can be just two different air masses. It can be, if you have a wet air mass that had cold, it can even actually be just two downdrafts that are forcing
yes,
stable air, essentially, up. So it feels, you're going up like a thermal, but it feels as smooth as wave. And you usually can't count on it because I can't at least see what's going on.
Yeah.
I take it when it's there, but it's hard to predict.
So-
Thank you,
so-
sorry to interrupt.
that's okay.
I mean, I'm curious in hindsight, looking at this then, knowing what you know now, but, you know, but not assuming knowledge you didn't know during the flight.
Yeah,
You know, I guess the thing you could have done there was when you encountered that sink, had you been really observant right about there,
yeah, right about there.
turn around,
No,
or no? What do you do?
I'm gonna argue you did exactly what we talked about in the Tears and Fears.
Yeah,
You, at the point, you always had, your glider gets, let's call it 4 to 5 miles per thousand at half of its L over D.
Okay.
You always had Dodge Center.
yeah. And
Yes.
if you turned around, you would have lost it.
You made the commitment somewhere along there to
Yeah.
go to Dodge Center.
Yeah,
Okay.
And you had it all the way,
Yeah.
and the sky decided you were going to use it.
every last foot of it. Yeah, I think by this time we were too far to make it back according to our computer, and you know, so.
Ask if you had prearranged.
That was a point I was going to make, you know. Nobody knew where we were going to go except us, and we didn't decide till after we took off. Of course, the trailer was tied out there, and I don't even remember if we had a vehicle to tow it. So we were totally unprepared, and I'm sharing with you from some of my mistakes, so hopefully spares you some of the same things. What I just want to reiterate the difference. This is the first flight, the sawtooth pattern, and the other one is, it's this kind of wiggly line, but it doesn't really show climbs and cruises, which it's different. It should have struck me that it was different.
So I have a question for
Yeah.
you then. If you analyze those two as different, and if you see this pattern on your next cross-country flight, what, if anything, will you do differently?
I will remember the experience I've had and analyze why is that line the way it is. Is it because I'm flying cloud streets? Is it because of convergence or something? I'll be thinking more and more, this is a little different, what's going on here and how does it affect my decision making? And that's where I wasn't. My brain was not in that place. And that's one of the lessons I wanted to impart.
I'm sorry, you're at 6,500 AGL. Just happy place.
But you see what can happen.
Well, the only thing I would comment on
Yeah.
is that on both of these, you got one thermal and you took off. You didn't hang around to see is this a stable situation? Now, in this case, you might have flown into a different air mass.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't have helped. But you got the one, you got, off you go.
Well, you notice we took 2 or 3 thermals relatively close to the airport before we made the, it really started to go. And that, I think that was kind of testing the water, and it was
But
good.
it just kept going up, so.
Yeah. Ben?
So your winds allowed for 22 knots. So I challenge you to think that lift and sink were Sweden.
Could be. Yeah, and actually, a good point, another point is, that was a lot of wind to be flying in. It tends to tear up thermals, for one thing, and the difference between 18 to 20 and 20 to 24 knots is significant.
But Leon, if you're flying in a pretty straight direction anyway, and you've got lift
Yeah,
on it, all
yeah.
of a sudden it just dies. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I can move one way or the other, but usually lift kind of stays in a fairly straight line with the wind, right?
It's not necessarily street. It could have a sinuous track over the ground over 30 miles. Not a problem.
Okay.
So-
Just look at your cloud streets. They're never straight in a line all the way down to the South Pole.
Right.
They wiggle, yeah. So I'm going to wrap things up, and I think we're going to skip the statistics part. We can do that some other time, but it's a nice day today. We should get out there and be ready to fly today. So anyhow, lessons learned, among others. Some of them we've already touched on. Sync happens. Things can change very quickly, very quickly. Be prepared for a possible landing away from Stanton on every cross-country flight. To Vicky's point, we had no arrangements with crew. We didn't have a trailer even out or untied or hooked up to the car. Be ready to shift gears. That was probably and we shifted gears all right, but maybe we should have been thinking earlier. Always have an out. And when I say that, I think of flying in other places that don't provide land out spots like Minnesota does, flying down in Florida where there's huge swamps and forests, out in Utah where there can be just huge areas of totally unsurvivable landing areas. You better have yourself at least one out, if not 2 or 3 at all times. Because this could happen anywhere. I mean, what we just experienced here, that could happen here, it could happen in Florida, it could happen in Utah, wherever. Maintain active situational awareness. That means I should have been thinking, what's going on here? What's different? And I'd never crossed my mind that when we were doing well, why is this behaving this way? Don't assume current favorable conditions will continue, and what goes up must come down. Now, that all being said, I want to also point out to you what Leon said earlier is on a typical Minnesota day where you see nice cumulus clouds out in front of you and so forth, if you're finding good lift and most of the clouds are working, you can be pretty doggone sure that it's going to continue to work. I don't think we had cumulus clouds that day. I don't think we did, as far as I can remember. But at any rate, so I don't want to scare you, but I just wanted to share with you this experience to help you kind of understand things can change, be prepared. Thank you.
Bravo.